And bad morning to you. This is episode 49 of Bad Morning News, brought to you by Brave Browser, the ad resistant, tracker resistant browser, and our patrons. Thank you. This is being broadcast on the 27th of September, 2018, and let's just really get on in there, I guess. We're still dealing with the Schrodinger's Deputy Attorney General, with Trump claiming that he doesn't want to fire or lose Rosenstein, and Rosenstein still uncertain as to his own position. However, I thought I'd start off today's broadcast from what the House Freedom Caucus has to say about Rosenstein. This is from Daily Signal as part of their law news section by Chuck Ross. House Freedom Caucus to Rosenstein, testify or resign. The House Freedom Caucus is calling on Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to testify about allegations that he offered to spy on President Donald Trump or resign from office. Tonight, the Freedom Caucus took an official position that Rod Rosenstein needs to come testify before the Judiciary Committee within the week, or he needs to resign, reads a tweet from the conservative Republican group. Rosenstein is set to meet on Thursday, today, with Trump to discuss reports about memos written by Andrew McCabe, the former FBI deputy director. According to the New York Times, McCabe claimed in memos that Rosenstein offered to wear a wire during meetings with Trump. McCabe, who was fired for lack of candor, also asserted that Rosenstein discussed using the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from office. Rosenstein disputed the report, saying he never seriously discussed opposing Trump or spying on him. Justice Department sources who were in the meetings have anonymously claimed that Rosenstein responded sarcastically to a request from McCabe to investigate Trump. Rosenstein reportedly offered to resign because he expected Trump to fire him. But Trump allies counseled the president not to fire Rosenstein, especially based on claims from McCabe. Fox News host Sean Hannity, a Trump confidant, said in a monologue on Friday that he believed the New York Times report was a setup aimed at forcing Trump to act impulsively and fire Rosenstein, who oversees the Mueller investigation. The House Freedom Caucus is packed full of close Trump allies, including North Carolina Representative Mark Meadows and Ohio Representative Jim Jordan. And that's the end of this short article. So, yes, we still don't quite know what the situation is with Rod Rosenstein today. He is still Schrodinger's deputy AG. And at the moment, we may not find anything out until, well, long after I'll be asleep and you all will probably be having your dinner. So hopefully this story will evolve fairly quickly over time, but we will see probably a lot more tomorrow. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of anticipating an end to this whole reality TV saga here.
Oh no, I
Yeah,
just think it's getting into act two, mate.
true. But yeah, I mean, as you said, I think that's a definite positive to Trump being in office is that it's quite entertaining, even for me. And I'm not typically one to follow reality TV, but frankly, it is fairly entertaining. I mean, I don't know if that makes me a fascist sympathizer, but I think he's. I mean, I was telling my friend the other day, I almost wish he was my grandpa or something. He's just hilarious. I mean, and I don't find him much different than a standard grandfather would be. I mean, amid all the talk about him being horrible and racist, I don't really find him that much different from a lot of people, um, just average people who
Yeah.
are
To be
whatever.
fair,
Sorry,
neither
go
do I.
ahead.
I was going to say, to be fair, I totally agree. Neither do I. I don't find him particularly more offensive than I find anybody else on this planet.
Yeah, yeah. Not to say I didn't want to give the impression that I think he's like a normal person because I don't
Mm.
think any politician is like a normal person. But just he's not super objectionable and kind of entertaining and hilarious. And that's what I think. That's what I want in a grandparent. So
Yeah, that's the kind of positive that you would expect. But yeah, I just wanted to hit that as a piece of catch up quickly on yesterday's broadcast. Why don't you track the bit that you raised on the IRS, actually, while we're at it? Just a little,
sure.
another, maybe not so light-hearted, but something to start really making people get incensed earlier today, I think, would be a good start.
Yeah, I hope all of you didn't just take a bite of breakfast, but yeah, this is from the Free Thought Project.com. IRS agents raid innocent woman's home, force her to use the bathroom while they watch. While investigating potential tax fraud, IRS agents raided the home of an innocent woman and engaged in a sick fetish once inside. See, this is written by Simon Black on June 8th, 2006, more than a decade ago. Armed agents from the Internal Revenue Service arrived at the home of Michael and Shelley Ione of Atwater, California. Michael Ione was suspected of tax fraud, and the IRS agents were there to conduct a search of the premises and look for evidence. About 30 minutes into the search, Shelley Ione, the wife who was not suspected of any crime whatsoever, told the agents who were ransacking her bedroom that she needed to use the bathroom. According to court documents, one of the IRS agents escorted Shelley to the bathroom, then came inside with her. Shelley protested and asked the agent to wait outside. The agent refused, stating that she needed to make sure Shelley was not hiding any evidence. Bear in mind, Shelley wasn't suspected of a crime, but an agent from the IRS stood there and watched this innocent woman urinate and defecate in her own toilet in her own home without so much as turning her head slightly or even pretending to avert her eyes. This is truly disgusting on so many levels. In most civilized countries, tax problems aren't even a criminal matter, they're civil, sorted out administratively rather than at gunpoint, and armed government thugs certainly aren't able to abuse power to this extreme, indulging in their weird fetishes to watch innocent women defecate in their own homes. But that's probably the craziest part about this entire story. But what's probably the craziest part is that when Shelley Ione sued for obvious reasons, the federal government mounted an aggressive and spirited defense of its actions. It's appalling. They literally tried to justify this ritualistic degradation of an innocent human being's most basic dignity by calling it standard procedure. Really, it's standard procedure for agents of the IRS to watch people crap in their own toilets. Do you get extra benefits for that? Another interesting fact here is that when Michael Ione requested to use the restroom, i.e., the guy who was actually suspected of a tax crime, no IRS agent accompanied him. Bear in mind, we're talking about the IRS. This isn't Jack Bauer saving the world from nuclear armed terrorists. No, this level of abuse and brutality is justified just because of a dispute over taxes. That's how desperately the government wants its money. Let's see. Shelley Ione was violated back in 2006, but the case was only recently settled last week. When the Iones filed suit, the government fought tooth and nail to keep it out of court and to throw out most of the charges. The government claimed IRS agents could be sued due to qualified immunity, which protects federal employees from lawsuits that may arise from the performance of their duties. In 2016, it finally went to court, and the U.S. federal judge ruled that the IRS agents could not be protected by qualified immunity since they were clearly violating basic standards of decency. But the government refused to accept that outcome and appealed the decision. Finally, last week, a federal appeals court affirmed the original court's ruling, concluding that the IRS agents completely violated Shelley's clearly established right to bodily privacy and were hence not entitled to qualified immunity. That's a major blow to the IRS, but this issue is still not resolved. The only thing that's been settled is that the agents aren't entitled to qualified immunity. So now Shelley has to sue again on the original charge of being violated 12 years ago. All right, so yeah, I mean, you definitely hear about cases like that, usually not in the context of the IRS, but typically with the DEA and searching for drugs. And of course, they always say that people might be hiding drugs, and so that's their justification for violating them in this way. I know there was a story a few years ago where they brought someone to a hospital and had doctors force a person to give them stool samples because the cops alleged that this guy was acting furtively, believing that he was hiding drugs in his ass, basically. So it doesn't surprise me too much. I mean, the context is, more extravagant, just, being the IRS seeming like that wouldn't be something they'd resort to. But, when you have these type of people who have qualified, who have this arbitrary authority over everyone, it's not surprised that there will be people who will push it to the limit if they're able to. What do you think about this?
Well, well, I'm glad that the courts have at least finally come back saying no, this is not within the bounds of qualified immunity. This is something that you shouldn't have done, and there was no reason for you to have done it. So you should not be protected from it, from any fallout from it. And I'm glad that the courts at least had the sensibility to agree that they went too far. Do I think that this is actually going to go anywhere in this woman's lifetime? No, it's already taken 12 years to get this far. And it's going to take as long as basically either the government allows. So remember, people, your tax dollars at work here. You're paying for these people to violate other people's privacy in this way and then spend years in the courts challenging any wrongdoing from their actions. So all of that court fee and whatnot that still exists for both sides, even if it's the government doing it. So yeah, that's your tax money being spent protecting these people from harm. So just bear that in mind. And bear in mind as well that these are the people who are trying to take your money too. So not only are they trying to take your money, they're trying to take any sense of privacy that you have if they're there. And they will fight tooth and nail to make sure that they don't get any kind of comeuppance for it. Meanwhile, you're still expected to say yes, sir, as half of your paycheck is basically ripped from your hands practically. So, yeah, I mean, I don't consider these agents valid in any way, shape, or form, and I think they should face whatever the harshest penalties under the laws exist today is available to them. They won't, but I think they probably should. But hey, like I said, this woman's got a very long case in front of her, and hopefully she'll continue to fight it out. I don't know if she'll be able to because it's going to get expensive, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, I think it may be time now to swap over to some financial news for a moment. There were a couple of articles I found highlighting some issues of big tech today, or recently at least. Now, this was published, unfortunately, about 10 days ago, so it's a little bit stale. But this is from Accounting Today. Twitter sinks after analyst flags accounting, quote, smoke and mirrors. Twitter Inc. shares are sliding after one Wall Street bear rang the alarm on the firm's spending, flagging smoke and mirrors on the cost line. In the first 2 quarters of the year, the company reported 0% and 3% operating expense growth, respectively. Surprisingly low, given issues with regulators and competition, MoffettNathanson founding partner Michael Nathanson wrote in a note to clients Monday, but the analyst thinks there may be more to those numbers than meets the eye. After digging into the most recent 10 quarters, we would argue that true underlying cost growth has actually been materially higher in the range of 13 to 15%. Given Twitter's dire need to improve platform safety and invest in more video content, we believe that expenses are set to escalate into the back half of the year and 2019. Twitter did not immediately respond to a request seeking comment. The stock dropped as much as 5.6% to its lowest intraday in about 5 months, taking other large cap technology firms down with it. All 10 members of the NYSE FANG Plus index were in the red Monday, with the declines led by Twitter, which was also the worst performer in the S&P 500 index. Consensus estimates appear to be underestimating Twitter's expense build, and will likely need to revise down margin expectations in 2019, continued Nathanson, who is one of 6 analysts with a sell rating on the company, according to Bloomberg data. With operating leverage flattening out, Twitter's extreme valuation will come back into focus, which wouldn't be a good thing for the stock. Now, that's the end of the article. For those of you not really aware, this does have some significant meaning. It means that Twitter is, well, either effectively committing a form of fraud on the market by claiming its costs are much lower than expected, therefore it's or than actual, therefore its profits should be huge compared to what is being actually reported by this company, which is a 10% cost increase over multiple quarters on what is being reported. So that on its own is a fairly significant sign that Twitter is in more financial pain than it wants everybody else to believe. And the fact that some analysts are now coming out and saying this means that there is a good probability more will likely start jumping on the bandwagon if they start looking at the numbers with a bit of scrutiny. What are your thoughts, Cryptic, on this?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have too much to add to that. Economics is not something I've really dug into too much yet. But yeah,
Oh,
on the same thing.
it's such a great subject, so much controversy. It's the political theater of money as far as I'm concerned, but it is good to watch the stock market every now and again to see what is going on. And this would explain why Twitter tends to be a little bit higher than my own expectations for valuation, because I don't see how they can keep this up without having huge costs. And the larger your cost, the lower your profit margin will be, and you won't be able to basically reinvest as much money into the company or into the shareholders' benefits and dividends as they would have liked originally. And that means people will be more inclined to sell or move their money elsewhere. And it may be a early warning sign. And if there's more systemic issues within accounting of Twitter, then it's a company you should be watching to put a short on more than anything else. And speaking of which, there's one other big company. Forbes had a mention on Facebook stock. Why you should not short Facebook stock. And I'm telling now, I think they're referring to doing it now, not doing it in general. The wrong culture, where one where the CEO's actions make it clear that the customer and employees are of secondary importance, can hurt a company's prospects, but it takes time for the effects of a bad culture to show up in the company's financial results and stock price. Bad culture can drive out top talent, which could mean that the company struggles to come up with new products that customers are eager to buy. That could also mean that customers look for the exits, seeking better alternatives for their spending. If that happens for long enough, even highly profitable companies can suffer from disappointing growth and stagnant stock prices, which perpetuates the departure of top talent, disappointing investment returns, and quitting customer. This comes into mind in considering the fate of Facebook, which has experienced a 12.5% increase in short interest since the end of August, according to Morningstar. Does this mean you should short Facebook stock? I would not go that far, since it has no debt and enjoys a 28% net profit margin. Even a growth slowdown would not cause Facebook to run out of money. but I am not tempted by its price, 22% below its July 20th all-time high, to buy the stock. I have no financial interest in the securities mentioned in this post. That's because there's something rotten in the state of Facebook. And with Mark Zuckerberg and a few insiders, 70% voting control, that rot is going to spread further. Before getting into that, let's look at Facebook's fantastic growth and profitability over the last 5 years. During that time, Facebook revenues have soared at an annual growth rate of 51.5% to $40.7 billion. Net income has climbed at a 246% annual rate to $15.8 billion, yielding a whopping 28% net profit margin. Sadly, things are slowing down for the social network. In the second quarter, Facebook reported a 41.9% increase in sales to $13.04 billion, which was lower than analysts expected and below its 5-year growth. And its $5.12 billion in profit was above expectations and yielded an impressive 39% net margin. The problem was disappointing growth guidance. As Facebook CFO said in a July 26 conference call, our total revenue growth rates will continue to decelerate into the second half of 2018, and we expect our revenue growth rates to decline by high single-digit percentages from prior quarters sequentially in both quarters of this year, while expenses will continue to grow 50 to 60% from last year, which raises the question of whether or not Facebook will ever be able to keep growing at over 50%. The problem is public pressure to cut out the rot that has contributed to an unknown proportion of its revenue growth. The rot I'm referring to is the kind of fake news, including Cambridge Analytica scandal, that brought CEO Mark Zuckerberg in to testify in front of Congress earlier this year. But there's more rot than that. As John Oliver explained on his HBO show September 13th, Facebook has also been used to fuel hate and violence in Myanmar. If Facebook is forced to cut out all the rot in its business, will there be enough revenue left to keep the company growing fast enough to justify buying its stock? I'm going to skip forward a bit. To his credit, Zuckerberg let Instagram one problem here is that Facebook seems unable to come up with big innovation on its own. Instead, it's acquired and copied. Think Instagram stories and Snap stories to get much of its growth. For example, it spent about $22 billion to acquire WhatsApp, $2 billion for Oculus, and $1 billion for Instagram. Of these three, the best investment by far was the least expensive one. To his credit, Zuckerberg let Instagram co-founders run the company in a way that they saw fit, but that ended several months ago, culminating the departure announcement of co-founders Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger on September 24th. As the Wall Street Journal reported, the two frequently clashed with Zuckerberg over a range of issues, including the extent to which Systrom and Krieger could chart their own course. According to people familiar with the relationship, the co-founders were also upset that some product tweaks to the photo sharing app that seemed to design to promote Facebook growth at Instagram's expense, some of the people said. And Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff got his 2 cents in against Facebook. As Bloomberg reported, he cited Facebook as an example of a company that needs to focus more on its corporate culture, citing recently announced departures of Systrom and Krieger. He described Facebook as being addictive for users as cigarettes to smokers, and referred to the culture problems there as, quote, a sign for them that and they need to start paying attention, according to Bloomberg. There's a little bit more to this article, but to be quite frank, the long-term question is still would need to be raised, but a short is a prediction that something is going to go completely bust. And at this point in time, that prediction is not safe to make for Facebook. That said, it's something which Zuckerberg needs to keep a damn close eye on, as far as I'm concerned, because if he doesn't, it will be a good reason to short Facebook, because they will lose the talent and they will lose the ability to produce good products, and they will lose customers as a result. It is a very vicious spiral that exists within that system. And if you're not careful and cognizant of it, it will bite you, and it will bite hard. And those who decide to shun investing in Facebook will never have to deal with that kind of fallout. But at the same time, in the short term, they won't be able to benefit from any of its amazing growth.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this news just makes me wonder really what the future, holds for these mega companies. I mean, will Facebook end up becoming this kind of public utility almost because it's just so entrenched in our culture now, I guess. And even if it has, these skirmishes from time to time with people, at times getting upset and them having to, be conciliatory and at least claim they're going to change things. I wonder, if that'll go on in perpetuity or if there'll be a point where people will actually turn away from it, and if it will actually end up going away or changing significantly. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of feels, it's still weird to me, honestly. Just the Facebook culture just kind of creeped up out of nowhere, just from my perspective. I mean, I just remember the time where MySpace was the thing, and then all of a sudden it just kind of disappeared. I mean, I
Disappeared.
still
Yeah,
remember it.
I
I mean,
remember that.
yeah,
I
I still
remember that
remember.
quite badly.
Yeah, I remember when Facebook was only because I was in middle high school when MySpace was still the kind of the main thing. And so
Mm.
later on, I remember hearing like about Facebook, but I heard that it was only for college students at the time, and I was in high school, and I was like, okay, whatever. And so I just never really got into it. So it's like to me, it's just become this huge thing where I'm, kind of viewing it from the sidelines. I just
Yeah,
wonder where this where this ends.
I remember that same period, but from a little later on. I was still in uni when MySpace was a thing, and everybody cared about MySpace in the States. And then I came over to Britain, and all of a sudden it was all Facebook. And I took one look at their policies and whatnot, and just would nope. And for years avoided them. Eventually, I had to create a Facebook account just to keep in touch with family and for certain events. But it's not something that I regularly use in any way, shape, or form. And I only ever tend to use it when I need to let people know that, yes, I'm safe because some terrorist event happened in Britain, or I've arrived home safe when I was traveling. And that's about the bare limit of what I ever really use it for. And as a result, Facebook gets very little information, value, or custom from me as a user. And I'm one of those zombies, basically, that cloud their numbers. And I've noticed as well that there are a lot of reports of youth users leaving Facebook simply because either they find it too boomery, I guess would be the best way of putting it. And they just don't like it because of the age gap, as it were, between them and most people on it. Or they just don't like the interface compared to other systems that they're more likely to use. But either way, Facebook is experiencing some serious issues at the moment, and it's going to have to deal with them. But they're not the only ones. We've been reporting on Google and its problems, and there's little to stop us doing so because they keep making it so goddamn easy. Um, this is coming from The Intercept today, from Ryan Gallagher. Former Google scientists tell Senate to act over company's, quote, unethical and unaccountable China censorship plan. The scientist who quit Google over its plan to build a censored search engine in China has told U.S. senators that some company employees may have actively subverted an internal privacy review of the system. Jack Paulson resigned from Google in August after The Intercept reported that the group of the internet giant staffers was secretly working on a search engine for China that would remove content about subjects such as human rights, democracy, peaceful protests, and religion. Quote, I view our intent to capitulate to censorship and surveillance demands in exchange for access to the Chinese market as a forfeiture of our values and governmental negotiating position across the globe, Paulson told his bosses. Now, Paulson has sent a letter to members of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation ahead of a hearing on Wednesday at which Keith Enright, Google's chief privacy officer, is scheduled to appear. Despite a major internal and external backlash over a period of almost 2 months, Google has so far refused to publicly address questions about its China censorship plan, codenamed Dragonfly. The appearance of Enright on Capitol Hill is likely to be the first time a representative of the company is forced to provide answers about the project. In his letter to senators, Paulson said that there has been, quote, a pattern of unethical and uncountable decision making from company leadership at Google. He called on lawmakers to pressure Enright to respond to concerns raised by 14 leading human rights groups who said in late August that Dragonfly could result in Google, quote, directly contributing to or becoming complicit in human rights violations. Paulson also shared information about Dragonfly with senators. He told lawmakers that the process of developing the Chinese search platform, there was, quote, a catastrophic failure of the internal privacy review process, one which the reviewers characterized as having been actively subverted. Catastrophic failure, Paulson mentions, relates to an internal dispute between Google employees who worked on privacy issues and engineers who developed the censored search system, sources said. The privacy reviewers approved aspects of the code for Dragonfly after they were told it did not involve user data. The Intercept exposed the project in early August. The privacy reviewers took another look at the code and felt their colleagues working on Dragonfly had seriously and purposefully misled them. The system did involve user data and had been designed to link users' search queries to personal phone numbers and track user movements, IP addresses, and information about the devices they used and the links they clicked on. Paulson told senators that he could, quote, directly verify that a prototype of Dragonfly would allow a Chinese partner company to, quote, search for a given user's search queries based on their phone number. He added that the censorship blacklist developed for the system contained the English term human rights, the Mandarin terms for student protest and Nobel Prize, and very large numbers of phrases involving Xi Jinping and other members of China's ruling Communist Party regime. Olson said that Dragonfly's system contained code to, quote, ensure only Chinese government-approved air quality data would be returned in response to Chinese users' search. The country authorities have a history of manipulating pollution data, raising the possibility that Google would provide Chinese citizens with false information to downplay the amount of toxins in the air. I'm going to skip a little bit further ahead to the end. Google launched the censored search engine in China in 2006, but stopped operating the service in 2010, citing concerns about the Chinese government censorship and efforts to hack activist Gmail accounts. Google founder Sergey Brin said in 2010 that he saw earmarks of totalitarianism in China in relation to censorship and surveillance, which he said he found personally quite troubling. Paulson told The Intercept in an interview earlier this month that he very much agrees with the case Sergey made in 2010. That's the company I joined, the one that was making that statement. If Google was now reversing its anti-censorship position, he said he could no longer be complicit as a shareholder and a citizen of the company. Google did not respond to a request for comment on this story. So, yeah, Google, we may have mentioned this before that Google was spying on China, but now members within Google, the data scientists, the people actually involved in the process, are actively starting to speak out against it. And I encourage this. Anybody who has worked for Google, if you're not happy with Google and what they're doing, say something right now, because this is the time. They are doing things actively in the media that they cannot deny because they have done them. So it's time for you to have your say in a public forum on what your company is doing to the world. And if you agree with them being able to censor China, say that. If you don't agree, speak out. Because if nobody else is going to decide how Google moves forward from today, then you're leaving that decision in amongst people who are quite happy to make those decisions for you. And I personally think that you should have the right to make those decisions yourself. And if that means you no longer can work for Google, there are a lot of companies out there that would love to see Google on your CV because they know just how good at hiring they are. So just bear that in mind. Google ain't the only place on earth to work for in tech, and there are a lot of better opportunities out there. But what are your thoughts, Cryptic?
Yeah, I definitely think that's probably one of the more effective strategies is for people who are working there, if they do disagree with what's going on, is to speak out and essentially be a form of a whistleblower. And because all these other avenues, who knows how long they could take, even if there is antitrust action or other legal action. That could I don't think that's quite as effective as directly having people stand up and challenge the culture. And it reminded me of, I think just a few months ago, there was a story about people working for Google who were upset over their one of their new proposed government contracts with some kind of, I think, military intelligence type deal. And people did come out and say, I don't want to go down this road, and I don't think this is what Google should be engaging in. So, I mean, that would be a great thing to see.
It would, and the reason why I cautioned about the job concern as well is I'm well aware of what Google is capable of. They fired a man for raising valid statistical concerns over their hiring policies and the fact that they can't force women into the industry if they aren't willing to work in the industry themselves in the first place. And the man basically was just fired for having valid scientific data to back his view that Google was becoming an ideological echo chamber. And I see little to disagree with that viewpoint. And the statistical data he presented was quite valid. It wasn't something that was really that controversial, in my opinion. And they made it into a huge controversy. Um, and they've made Demore, the man who released this report, as an internal memo. They made this man into a pariah within the industry because of his views. But when it comes to things like censorship of terms like human rights and whatnot, if an HR person is saying that that sort of thing is an okay belief to have and that you shouldn't have a job in this company, then I'd really question whether or not they are serving your own human rights as a human resources representative.
Yeah, that's the thing about so many of these companies is they're running around working for the military industrial complex and building censored search engines for China while they're over here pontificating about uh just the social justice stuff where that's too offensive. That guy is fired because he just gave his opinion about the whole STEM thing, and people making it into this huge controversy. Why aren't there more women in STEM? As if that's some huge travesty or
Hmm.
something that requires all that attention. And like you said, that's people. So he that guy got fired over that incident, but I mean, yeah, so that's what they value apparently. It's
Hmm.
just on the surface. I feel like that really reflects so much of the culture with places like Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and so many of the Western liberal hubs is that they don't care about the military industrial complex or any of that human rights stuff, but when it comes to having the right appearance of being politically correct, of course, they're willing to make that into a priority.
Oh yeah, of course they are. But yeah, the I mean, it's not obviously it's not just big tech that suffers from this kind of madness. You've got universities who've had to deal with something very similar over the past few years, and particularly Canada, I have to say. Wilfrid Laurier's Lindsay Shepherd, if I'm not mistaken, is having to sue her employer at the moment for making uh, her situation untenable within the school and impossible anywhere else because of the way that she's been pilloried by the school itself. It's quite dramatic just how quick these people will fight back and how hard they will fight back against the voices of people saying that they're actively being discriminated against uh, for whatever reason it might be. And this is the problem. These progressive types that absolutely everything now, from gaming to Linux, and all the way back throughout the entire education system. They don't seem to recognize the fact that they are discriminating. They are committing the action that they claim they're trying to stop, but they think that that discrimination is okay because they're doing it. I mean, I really don't understand the justification, to be quite frank. They'll use oppression. Well, you're using as the justification. Well, you're using oppression to justify the reduction of oppression. How is this valid? Where is the logic? Where is the sense? And then they'll usually devolve to appeal to emotion and then some sort of ad hominem where if you don't support this rule, you're for the abject rape of women and discrimination against everybody. And no, that's not how it works. You can't make those claims. They aren't true. They're not logical. They're just insults. And if that's what you have as your argument, you've already lost. So come up with something that works. Please, I beg you. I'd love to know something that works from the left. But I've yet to see anything. So yeah, I think I'll move away from Google now. Let's hit up that bit on the Patriot missiles. No, yeah, Patriot missiles, and then we'll tackle Japan.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, this is from antiwar.com, written by Jason Ditz. Pentagon to withdraw Patriot missile systems from Middle East, citing a general shift in U.S. military focus toward targeting Russia and China in great power competition. Officials say the U.S. will be withdrawing 4 Patriot missile systems from the Middle East. The systems in Kuwait, Jordan, and Bahrain will be sent back to the U.S. in the next 2 months for refit and modernization, and then they will be moved on to other locations where they can target nations that are more fashionable targets at this moment. Pentagon officials are refusing to provide specifics on where these missiles are going, but talk of targeting Russia would suggest more deployments to Eastern Europe, where the U.S. has been participating in a protracted NATO buildup against Russia. As far as China goes, deployments would be less clear, though this might be part of a Pacific pivot that U.S. officials have been talking up for years on end. This may mean deployments to Southeast Asia, as presumably the Korean Peninsula will not be considered with ongoing diplomacy there. More pivoting, I guess, to potentially Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. That's where I would expect them to probably go. As we've reported on a lot of stories of U.S. Conducting war drills and whatnot on the in the Eastern Europe area, and also there was this bizarre story I covered a week or two ago about this. On the surface, they claim it's a U.S. embassy, but they're actually doing some kind of bioterror experiments there. Who knows what's going on. Southeast Asia. I mean, I know they've been talking about that a lot. Specifically, uh, I think they actually did build a new base in Japan, I believe, after all this time, and with already long-standing bases in Japan. I think there's talk of reopening bases in the Philippines, which used to have major bases, and they claim they don't really have a major base right now, but they of course have. There's always an attaché of U.S. Personnel stationed there because there was a murder that was committed by a U.S. Marine just a few years ago on in the Philippines, and I feel like a lot of these places have been pawns for a long time. Just I know that my mother was from the Philippines, and she like her whole lifetime. Uh, there was always like a U.S. military presence, and her sister actually ended up marrying this U.S. sailor she met while she was working on the base there, and that was really like what happens with bases anywhere in the world. It becomes this. The locals depend on it, for jobs and economically. So, I mean, just something to watch and see how the empire continues forward with its constant base creation around the world.
We'll see what happens. I mean, there's always the possibility that it is a scale down, but at this point, I would hesitate to make any kind of claim towards that because there's no evidence to say that it's really happening at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's quickly move over to Asia for a moment because Japan's having a real population problem. And I think it's worth bringing to attention again. This is from news.com.au. Why young single people in Japan are no longer having sex. It's a difficult concept to digest, but Japan is facing a national catastrophe simply because young people aren't having sex. By Vanessa Brown. In an era where dating is at your fingertips, one part of the world is losing interest in conventional relationships altogether. For a country with more than 127 million people, very few are choosing to go on a date or even get intimate with another person. In fact, the national turnoff is growing so rapidly that almost half of those under 40 in Japan are still virgins. Basically, sex is no longer a priority for the younger demographic. A, quote, celibacy syndrome, which could have huge effects beyond its borders. According to investigation by SBS's The Feed, millions of people under 30 aren't even dating. Instead, they simply turn to masturbation clubs or robots for intimacy. While it may sound comical, this growing trend is a problem the government says is only getting worse and could have dire consequences on Japan and the world. Japan already has one of the lowest birth rates. With a population that has been shrinking for the past decade, Japan is projected to drop a further one-third by 2060. With birth rates at an all-time low, the Feed's presenter Mark Fennell says adult diapers are almost outselling nappies for babies. The cause of abstinence has been blamed on a number of areas, from porn to anime and even the use of robots for sex. But according to Fennell, there's a much bigger player at hand. Young people are just, quote, too busy for a relationship or even to have sex with another person. Single, quote, salary man, 26-year-old Taiyo Hashimoto, says his 15-hour-a-day workloads mean he has little time for a relationship or even to go on a date. I'm supposed to finish work at 7 p.m., but I work overtime basically every day, he said, via a translator. The work is so busy. If people don't have an interest in getting girls, they just don't get girls, and that's why people are single. Working in an office, Mr. Hashimoto is on a mission to climb the corporate ladder, which often means he will catch the last train home at midnight after having drinks with his boss. I have to keep up with him, which is hard on me. He has a drink, so do I. He asks for another, so do I. That's what you're expected to do, he says. But along with work, he said the booming sex industry provides young people with a platter of options when it comes to intimacy, many which require little commitment. From escorts to fetish clubs, the pressure for finding a relationship is all but increased. Men go to brothels or massage parlors, fooled by after work drinks with their colleagues. That sort of thing is common. Actually, they brag, I met this type, or mine was so hot to each other. It's all part of the fun. In a survey conducted in 2011, the amount of single people in Japan had reached an all time high. Research found that 61% of unmarried men and 49% of unmarried women between the age of 18 and 34 were not in any type of relationship. Another study said 30% of men in their 30s and the same proportion in their 20s admitted having no experience of dating a woman. Aoyama, sorry, is a former dominatrix and sex and relationship therapist, known as the quote love queen. She told Fennel that when sex was so freely available in clubs, there was no incentive to be in a relationship. There are lots of places for men to have fun. Men don't have to bother having a girlfriend. Young people in today's Japan are into a virtual world where they meet very pretty girls. A flesh and blood girl is scary. She might disobey you. In a desperate bid to get young people back into relationships and meeting people, local governments have set up speed dating services where people can come and meet potential lifelong partners. These matchmaking services work like you might expect. Single people show up to go on quick dates one after the other. When they're done, they follow up with people they find most compatible. The practice is known as konkatsu, or marriage hunting, with local authorities seeing the service as a major step forward, bumping the fertility rate back up to healthy levels. But Aoyama agrees that Japan's corporate culture is affecting what's happening in the bedroom, and even when it comes to finding a date. Really, if this continues, problems like declining birth rates will get worse. She said she's saying she believed the country should adopt polygamy to overcome the problem. It involves one excellent man and allows a number of women to bear his children, she said. But while the Japanese culture has a strong emphasis on men being the breadwinners, which has serious implications for marriage and having children, few are wanting to settle down and get married. According to The Guardian, Japanese men have become less career driven, less solvent, as a lifetime job security has waned. However, Japanese women have become more independent and ambitious, such as sushi chef Yuki Chizui even. At 31, she runs a Japanese first sushi restaurant staffed by women entirely. She said being a strong woman and her ambition to break down barriers in the workplace was not popular with potential suitors. I can find men, but the problem is I speak out a lot, and that somehow puts them off. She told the feed. To keep their dignity, men want someone weaker than themselves, thin and frail, soft and feminine, like the maid cafe girls. That's the end of the article from news.com. But yeah, Japan's basically uh, failing to procreate because everybody's too busy for sex or meaningful relationships, at least, and having a family. So, bit odd that, to say the least, but this is uh, this is what happens in certain cultures when they go completely awry. And the work culture in Japan is very unique, in my opinion. I've not seen anything quite like how the Japanese do things. It's a very unusual kind of culture. They work until they fall asleep, and often, if they fall asleep at their desk, that's not a negative. That's actually a sign of a diligent worker. They're often people who feign falling asleep at their desk simply so that they appear to be just as hardworking as other people on their team, or just as wrung out as other people on their team. Because if they were able to do a full 18 hours where everybody else was only doing 15 and still look bright and chirpy, nobody would believe that they're actually doing the 18 hours because nobody else is bright and chirpy. It is unbelievably bizarre. Equally bizarre is how they deal with failure, because people will basically claim that no, it's not my fault until it is categorically proven beyond a shadow of a doubt it is their fault. And instead of going, okay, my bad, I should have owned up to this earlier from the very beginning, they will resign because of their pride and not actually try to fix the problem at all or learn from the situation. It it is baffling to me. But I work from a very different culture and a very different background and have a couple of them to play with to actually pick and mix what works best and what doesn't. And there are aspects of Japanese culture that do function very well for their workers because they wouldn't have the kind of retention that they do otherwise. But at the same time, it's not the kind of environment that you would call normal by Western standards. But yeah, it just seems like they take a bit too much time. I think it may be worth you covering that follow-up one now, Cryptic, because it ain't just the work hours that it ain't just Japan that's going to have issues with sex robots.
Yeah, yeah. So this is from the Free Thought Project. Again, first robot brothel set to open in U.S., but religious government officials trying to ban sex with computers. A new robot sex doll brothel opened in Houston, but politicians and church groups want new laws passed to keep it out of town. This is written by John Vibes. A Toronto company is planning to open a sex robot retailer that will allow customers to rent the adult love dolls to see if they want to purchase one, essentially making the business a robot brothel. The company Kinky's Dolls opened the first North American robot brothel in Toronto last year and have presumably done well enough to open up a second location in the States. Legal experts say that the company is not breaking any laws and have every right to open their business, but local politicians and Puritans are seeking to prevent any establishment of this nature from opening in the city. Mayor Sylvester Turner said that even if there are no laws on the books that make a robot brothel illegal, he will just write new laws. This is not the kind of business I would like to see in Houston, and certainly this is not the kind of business the city is seeking to attract, Turner told the Houston Chronicle. Houston attorney Richard Weaver, who specializes in business law, said that this type of business is currently legal, but that could change if new legislation is passed. Obviously, there are currently no laws in the US to prevent the sale of the type of dolls intended for this robot brothel. Unless a new ordinance is passed, this business will likely open and operate in Houston, Weaver said. The fact that this is even a concern for people shows that this country has a long way to go before shedding its Puritan culture. Sex is the most natural thing in the world, but in this society, it is still quarantined to the darkest alleys of our communities. And I have dark. Sorry about that. Uh, of our communities and the deepest corners of our minds, people can be misled into thinking that we live in an over sexualized society because it is often used in television and advertising. However, the reason why sex is so effective in advertising and popular on TV is because it is regulated so heavily in the real world compared to most places in the world and most times in history. Modern America is actually an extremely sexually repressed society, and the reaction to this new and strange industry is a perfect example of that. And in a statement, the mayor said he believed a business like this could cause men to dehumanize women. We have legitimate concern that this business would encourage men to dehumanize women, Turner said. Spokesperson for a local religious human trafficking nonprofit told reporters that these robots could train men to become rapists. Our biggest concern is that this sex brothel with robots is going to train men to become rapists, they told the Chronicle. Yeah, all right. So anyway, yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I don't know that I completely agree with the writer of the article said about like necessarily uh sexual repression versus over sexualization. I think there's more kind of nuance to that. But either, in any case, I obviously I don't favor regulating businesses based on morality, and
Hmm.
kind of another one of those. So
Well, this is the thing. The article does actually go on to say after that although politicians and church volunteers think that this is a popular idea, it's not what the sex workers themselves would say. And scientific studies are also debunking a lot of those types of claims. Research conducted by Baylor University and West Virginia University, the homicide rate fell an average of almost 20% in cities that had access to erotic services from Craigslist for sex workers. So, actually being able to directly liaise with your sex worker reduces the amount of violent crime, apparently, that could exist. And that, as unusual as that may be to the puritanical, uh, biblical right wing, it is the case. If you constantly keep something under pressure, it will seek release. And if you provide a ethical form of release in the form of robots, you are actually reducing the chance of rape occurring because, well, you could just have the robot. Why harm someone when there's a machine? It won't complain. It won't do anything negative. You won't get any fallout for it because it's a machine. It doesn't have any emotions, whereas people do, and people have nerves and things like that. Everything with the robot is simulated, everything with a person is not. So, unless you can't find an attraction there, I don't see the argument for why it would increase rape or why it would increase violence to have these in society. I do see an argument to say it would decrease birth rates because we have first-hand experience of that from Japan. But beyond that, I don't see it as being something that is legitimate. I also don't see it as something that one should really endure because, but then again, I do have a very fulfilling relationship, so I it's an anathema to me personally. However, if this is the healthiest expression that they have, and the easiest way to actually get some kind of a date is to make one, then all right, I guess you'll cut yourself out of the gene pool, and so be it. But if that's what makes you smile, go on.
yeah, definitely trying to the more you legislate things and increase the prohibition of things, the more it just will continue on, but in the black market, which has more negative effects on actual people.
Hmm. Well, let's hit up some of the comments to finish off. Regarding the only comments we've got today are from Daniel Hatfield regarding, I believe it was Google, Facebook, and Twitter. The more pain they are in, the better. Scary in referring to the Chinese censorship search engine that Google's building. And regarding my advice for speaking out against Google, line up the next job first. Regarding Japan, the fact that people are too busy is bizarre, and companies need to give people more time off to mess around. They are very work oriented, but that has its extreme. Some other countries are opposite. A happy medium, moderation is the ticket. Regarding robot sex workers, oh my god, hard to imagine something more pathetic. There's more to it than that. What does it do to desensitize people towards relationships? It may be that they see less value in having an active relationship if they were to follow that route. And like I said,
That is actively the case in Japan. That is something one could logically claim would occur. That the value of a relationship with another human being could be reduced, and these people would basically be, to some extent, removing themselves, as I said, from the gene pool by refusing to get involved with any other living person. As I said, if they choose to do that, that's their choice. I don't necessarily agree that that's the best choice they can make for themselves, but it's their one to make. It's not one that I'm willing to do for them, and I don't think anybody else should claim that it's their right to do so either. If they want to have a robot relationship, that's their prerogative. And if that robot becomes sentient, then there's something that we'll need to discuss further down the line. But otherwise, if it's just a dumb bot, I don't see an issue here. I really don't.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's yeah, I definitely I think you summed it up really well. I mean, there's always questions about its impact on society and on birth rates and everything. But at the end of the day, it's don't never need more government overreach and claiming they're trying to save people. That's always a sign someone's just trying to
Yep.
control people.
And on that note, I think it's probably a good time to end. So, as our founder would say, smash the state, fuck the system, and have a bad morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.